You felt this before. You walk into a room and something changes inside you. Not because something bad happened, not because anyone said anything cruel, but something about that place makes you feel smaller, quieter, less yourself. And you probably thought it was just you, that maybe you were being too sensitive, that maybe you needed to toughen up or adjust better. But here's the truth. Some places change who you are without you even noticing. They don't attack you directly, they don't announce themselves as harmful, they just slowly wear you down day after day until you start forgetting what you used to be like before you entered that space. This happens more often than most people realize. It happens at work, it happens at home, it happens in friendships, it happens in communities you thought were safe. And the worst part? You usually don't see it happening. You just wake up one day and realize you don't recognize yourself anymore. You've become quieter, more careful, less confident, and you can't even explain why. There are 7 environments that do this, 7 types of spaces that slowly erase the person you really are. And most people spend years in at least one of them without realizing what's happening. Today, we're going to walk through each one. Not with fancy theories or complicated words, just the plain truth about what these places do and how they work. Because once you see it clearly, you can finally understand what's been happening to you. And more importantly, you can start making choices that protect who you really are. If you're enjoying this message, subscribe, leave a like, and share this with someone who needs it. Now, let's continue. And the real reason this happens is not what most people think. The first environment is a place where you're always being corrected. Every time you speak, someone fixes your words. Every time you try something, someone tells you the right way to do it. Every time you share an idea, someone explains why it won't work or how it could be better. At first, it might seem helpful, like people are just trying to guide you. But over time, something happens inside you. You start second-guessing yourself before you even open your mouth. You stop sharing ideas because you already know someone will shoot them down. You become quiet, not because you have nothing to say, but because you've learned that saying things just leads to being corrected. This happens in families where one person always knows better. It happens in workplaces where your boss micromanages every detail. It happens in friendships where one person always has to be the expert. And the damage is quiet. You don't lose yourself all at once. You just stop trusting your own thoughts. You stop believing you have anything valuable to offer. You become smaller and smaller until you're just agreeing and nodding, even when you know something different inside. Have you felt this? That moment when you think of something to say, but you stop yourself because you already know what's coming? That's not you being careful. That's you being trained to stay silent. And here's what most people don't realize. The person correcting you might not even be trying to hurt you. They might think they're helping. They might believe they're teaching you or protecting you from mistakes. But the result is the same. You stop being yourself. You start being the version of you that doesn't get corrected. And that version is not really you. But there's something deeper. The second environment is a place where you can't speak freely. This doesn't mean a place where you're forbidden to talk. It means a place where you have to be very careful about what you say, where certain topics are off limits, where certain feelings can't be expressed, where you've learned that honesty causes problems. So you start editing yourself. Before you say anything, you run it through a mental filter. Is this safe to say? Will this upset someone? Will this create tension? And slowly, without realizing it, you stop saying what you actually think. You start saying what keeps the peace. This happens in families where conflict is forbidden, where everyone pretends everything is fine, even when it's not. It happens in relationships where one person can't handle criticism or difficult conversations. It happens in workplaces where speaking up gets you labeled as difficult or negative. And what happens to you in these places? You become a carefully edited version of yourself. You learn to smile when you're angry. You learn to stay quiet when you disagree. You learn to swallow your real thoughts and present only the safe ones. Does this sound familiar? That feeling of walking on eggshells, never quite sure what's okay to say? That's not peace. That's silence under pressure. And the cost is enormous. Because when you can't speak freely, you can't be known. People only see the version of you that's been filtered and edited. They don't see the real you. And after a while, even you start forgetting what the real you thinks and feels. You become so used to being careful that being honest starts to feel dangerous. Even when you're alone, even when you're safe, you can't quite remember how to speak without that filter. And this is one of the cruelest ways a place can destroy you, not by silencing you directly, but by teaching you to silence yourself. And this is where most people get hurt. The third environment is a place where your needs don't matter. Not because people openly ignore you, but because every time you express a need, it gets dismissed, or delayed, or turned into a conversation about someone else's needs instead. You say you're tired, and someone reminds you how tired they are. You say you need help, and someone explains why now isn't a good time. You say something hurt you, and someone explains why you shouldn't feel that way. At first, you try harder to explain. You think maybe you're not being clear enough. Maybe if you just say it differently, people will understand. But eventually, you stop trying. You stop expressing needs altogether because you've learned it doesn't lead anywhere. This happens in relationships where one person's comfort is always more important. It happens in families where one person's problems take up all the space. It happens in workplaces where your concerns get buried under everyone else's priorities. And what happens to you? You start thinking your needs aren't legitimate. You start believing that wanting anything for yourself is selfish. You start living like you're supposed to be there for everyone else, but no one is supposed to be there for you. Have you ever felt guilty for needing something? Like you were asking for too much just by having basic needs? That's not you being high maintenance. That's you learning to disappear. Because when your needs consistently don't matter, you start to believe you don't matter. Not in a dramatic way, just in a quiet, slow way that makes you stop asking, stop expecting, stop hoping. You become someone who handles everything alone, who never complains, who never asks for help. And people might even praise you for being so strong and independent. But it's not strength. It's what happens when you give up on being cared for. But it doesn't stop there. The fourth environment is a place where you're always being compared to others. Someone else is always doing it better. Someone else is more successful. Someone else is more talented. Someone else is further along, and you're constantly measured against them. This doesn't always come from cruel people. Sometimes it comes from people who think they're motivating you, who think that showing you what others have achieved will inspire you to do better. But what it actually does is make you feel like you're never enough as you are. You could accomplish something real, something meaningful, and instead of celebrating it, someone will mention how someone else did it faster or better or younger. And slowly, your own achievements start to feel worthless because there's always someone ahead. This happens in families where siblings are compared. It happens in workplaces where your work is constantly measured against colleagues. It happens in social circles where everyone's life is held up next to everyone else's. And what does this do to you? It makes you stop celebrating yourself. It makes you feel like nothing you do is ever actually good enough. It makes you restless and dissatisfied, always chasing the next thing, never able to just be proud of where you are. Have you noticed this? That even when you succeed, you can't enjoy it because you're already thinking about what you should be doing next? That's not ambition. That's exhaustion from constant comparison. Because when you're always measured against someone else, you never get to just be yourself. You're always trying to match someone else's pace, someone else's style, someone else's life. And in that process, you lose track of what you actually wanted, what actually mattered to you before you started comparing. You become someone who lives in competition, even when you don't want to. Someone who can't rest because rest feels like falling behind. And it gets clearer once you see the next part. The fifth environment is a place where your feelings are always dismissed. You feel hurt and someone tells you you're overreacting. You feel worried and someone tells you you're being dramatic. You feel upset and someone tells you it's not a big deal. At first, you might argue. You might try to explain why you feel the way you do. But after enough times being told your feelings are wrong, you stop defending them. You start wondering if maybe you really are too sensitive. Maybe you really do make things bigger than they are. And that's when the damage really starts. Because you stop trusting yourself. You stop believing your own feelings are valid. You start apologizing for being upset. You start hiding when you're hurt because you don't want to be told you're exaggerating. This happens in relationships where one person decides which feelings are acceptable. It happens in families where certain emotions are treated as weakness. It happens in workplaces where showing feelings is seen as unprofessional. And what happens to you in these places? You become someone who doesn't know how to feel anymore. You second-guess every emotion. You minimize your own pain. You talk yourself out of being upset because you've been trained to believe your feelings don't matter. Does this sound familiar? That moment when you feel something strongly but immediately start questioning whether you have the right to feel it. That's not you being rational. That's you being taught to distrust yourself. Because your feelings are information. They tell you when something is wrong. They tell you when you're being hurt. They tell you when you need to make a change. And when you learn to dismiss them, you lose your ability to protect yourself. You become someone who endures things that should not be endured. Someone who stays in situations that are harmful because you've stopped listening to the part of you that says this doesn't feel right. The sixth environment is a place where you always have to pretend. You can't show up as you actually are. You have to perform a version of yourself that fits. A version that's happier, more agreeable, more put together, more whatever that place requires. Maybe you have to pretend you're fine when you're struggling. Maybe you have to pretend you agree when you don't. Maybe you have to pretend you're someone more confident, more successful, more content than you really are. And at first, it might feel manageable, like you're just being polite or professional or appropriate. But over time, the pretending becomes exhausting. And worse, you start losing track of who you actually are underneath the performance. This happens in social groups where everyone is keeping up appearances. It happens in families where you're expected to play a certain role. It happens in workplaces where showing vulnerability is seen as weakness. It happens in relationships where you can't let your guard down. And what does this do to you? It splits you in half. There's the person you show everyone, and then there's the person you actually are. And the gap between those two versions gets wider and wider until you don't know which one is real anymore. Have you felt this? That strange loneliness that comes from being around people but knowing they don't really see you? That's what happens when you spend too much time pretending. Because even when people like you, even when they accept you, you know they're accepting the pretend version, not the real one. And so their acceptance doesn't actually touch the real you. It just reinforces that the real you has to stay hidden. You become someone who is surrounded by people but deeply alone. Someone who can be in a room full of friends and still feel like nobody knows you. Because nobody does. They only know the version you've been showing them. And the real you slowly fades from lack of being seen. But there's something deeper. The seventh environment is a place where nothing you do is ever enough. You could work harder, do more, give everything you have, and it still wouldn't meet the standard. The goalposts keep moving. The expectations keep rising. No matter what you accomplish, there's always more you should be doing. This is not a place that pushes you to grow. This is a place that makes you feel like you're failing even when you're succeeding. Maybe it's a job where your efforts are never acknowledged, only your mistakes. Maybe it's a relationship where your partner always finds something wrong, no matter how hard you try. Maybe it's a family where approval is always just out of reach. And what happens to you in this environment? You become someone who never rests, someone who pushes and pushes and pushes, hoping that maybe this time it will be enough. But it never is. You start to believe that you're the problem, that if you were just better, smarter, more capable, then you'd finally measure up. But the truth is, in places like this, there is no measuring up. The game is designed so you can't win. Have you noticed this? That exhausted feeling of trying everything and still feeling like you're falling short? That's not failure. That's what happens when you're in a place that won't let you succeed. Because these environments don't want you to feel enough. They need you to feel lacking so you'll keep trying harder. They need you insecure so you'll keep proving yourself. They need you running so you won't stop and question whether this place is even good for you. And over time, you become someone who doesn't know how to be satisfied, who can't celebrate wins because you're already focused on the next thing, who feels guilty resting because rest feels like giving up. You lose the ability to feel proud, to feel content, to feel like you've done well. And this might be the most devastating way a place can destroy you. And this is where everything connects. Here's what all 7 of these environments have in common. Not all at once, not in obvious ways, but slowly, quietly, they teach you that being yourself is not safe, not welcome, not enough. So you adjust, you shrink, you edit, you perform, you apologize for existing as you are. And the cruelest part is that you often don't realize it's happening. You think you're just adapting, just being mature, just learning to get along. But adaptation is supposed to help you thrive, not disappear. When a place requires you to give up core parts of yourself just to exist in it, that's not adaptation, that's erosion. And you can spend years in these environments telling yourself it's temporary, telling yourself it will get better, telling yourself you just need to be stronger or more patient or more understanding. But the truth is, some places will never be safe for who you really are. Not because you're flawed, but because those places need you to be smaller than you are in order to function. Does this make sense now? When you look back at times you felt lost or disconnected from yourself, can you see the environment that was shaping you? It wasn't all in your head. It wasn't you being weak or too sensitive. It was a real thing happening in a real place that had real effects on who you became. And the reason this matters is simple. Once you see it, you can make different choices. You can start asking yourself, is this place letting me be who I am, or is it slowly asking me to become someone else? And when the answer is clear, you can decide what to do with that information. Because you deserve to exist in places that don't require you to abandon yourself. Places where you can speak freely, feel freely, need freely, be freely. And recognizing what's been destroying you is the first step to finding what will protect you. But here's the part most people overlook. You don't have to cut everyone out or burn everything down to protect yourself. Sometimes recognizing these environments is enough. Just seeing clearly what's been happening gives you the power to make small, important changes. Maybe it means spending less time in certain places. Maybe it means setting boundaries you didn't know you were allowed to set. Maybe it means choosing to be honest instead of always keeping peace. Maybe it means walking away from spaces that require you to be less than you are. And yes, sometimes it means leaving. Not with drama or anger, but with quiet clarity. Because staying in a place that destroys you, even slowly, even quietly, is not strength. It's just slow disappearance. The truth is this: who you are matters. Not who you could be if you tried harder, not who you'd be if you fixed all your flaws. Who you actually are right now matters. And any place that makes you feel like you need to hide that, edit that, apologize for that, is not a place that deserves you. You've already spent enough time being smaller than you are, quieter than you are, less than you are. And maybe you thought that was just part of life, part of being an adult, part of getting along with people. But it's not. It's what happens when you stay too long in environments that were never built for your wholeness. And you can choose differently now. Not perfectly, not all at once, but you can start paying attention to how places make you feel. You can start asking yourself, do I feel more like me here or less? And then you can trust that answer, because you know, you've always known. You just needed permission to believe what you were feeling. So here it is. Trust yourself. Protect yourself. Choose places and people that let you be whole. If this message helped you, subscribe so you don't miss the next reflection, leave a like, and share this with someone who needs to hear this today.